Hi everyone, I'm Lisa and welcome to Lisa's Stamp Studio. Today's Christmas card is for that special someone on your Christmas list. We're going to be creating a Christmas card with a Z fold. And although that fold has been around for a while, I think you're going to be amazed at how stunning this very simple black and white layout is for this card. You'll only need one color ink pad. That's black, and we're going to use some Versamark for some embossing, and I'll give you great tips along the way. Remember, you can find all the cutting dimensions for today's project along with pictures and supplies over on my blog. If you're here visiting from YouTube, you'll find the link in the description of this video below, making it easy for you to navigate. While you're there, make sure you click on my online classes tab where I've got some fun ways for you to stamp with me from home. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's project. Here's a close-up of this Z fold. I added a little piece of ribbon here because when I handed this to Bob the Builder, those of you who know my blog know that he is my husband, that's his nickname. He had difficulty in figuring out how this panel works. So when I put the ribbon there and we tried again, he was like, oh, much better. So we've got the ribbon here. So here's how the card opens. You actually pull it and then the panel opens up. Isn't this gorgeous? Definitely a card for that special someone or few on your Christmas list. Let's go ahead and get started on putting it together. I'm going to be using the Night of Bethlehem stamp set. If you don't know, I offer a great studio stamps in the mail program where every month I include stamps. Some month we also include the coordinating framelits as I have here. I've got one missing because we're going to use it today. And the pre-cut supplies that are free. Yeah, I said free pre-cut supplies to make 8 projects. If you're not familiar with it, click on the description bar below, which will navigate you to my blog if you're here from YouTube, and you'll be able to check on Studio Stamps in the Mail, where you'll be able to find all the details. It's not a club, so you can pick and choose which ones you like. That's the best part. I'm bringing in a Stampin' Trimmer, and I'm going to be using this for some scoring. Ahead of the video, I cut myself a piece of thick Whisper White cardstock for the base, and I did score that in half. That's simple enough. Those cutting dimensions are on my blog as well. But I've also cut myself a strip of basic black cardstock. This strip we're going to score, and we're going to score it at 4 and 8. So I've got my trimmer here, and the great thing about the Stampin' Up! Trimmer is you've got the score blade and the cutting blade both on the tracks. You can just move them out of the way. Love that about the features. There's a line here at the top that keeps your paper nice and straight, and the printed grid lines and measurements are wonderful. There's a clear coating over this, so you don't have to worry about those rubbing off over time. So I'm here at the 4-inch mark, and I'm going to score. And then I'm going to move all the way over here to 8. But you'll see it ends at 6. That's where this great extended arm comes in. Even on the back, there is a little leg here that can extend to make sure there's no bowing here when you go to score. So this next one is going to be here at 8 inches. I absolutely love this trimmer and scorer. So now we've got this. This is going to make the connection for the Z fold. Here's the base of that card, and we're going to fold that in half. And then here's the piece that we just scored. So I'm going to go ahead and crease. So you're going to find that this piece is in half. And then there's a small tab here that's actually going to go in the opposite direction. That's going to hold the panel for the swing on this card. I've also cut a piece of Designer Series paper. This comes from the Merry Music Designer Series paper stack. Oh, I'm loving this. Double-sided, just like all the Stampin' Up! Designer papers. Unless they're specialty papers, they'll be noted that way in the catalog. I'm going to actually mount this to the front of my card because we're going to do some die cutting. But this time, instead of just putting adhesive in my 4 corners, which is what I typically do, I'm going to make sure that I put enough adhesive in the center of this too, so that when I die cut, I'm not going to actually have some floppy pieces where the openings are going to be. So I'm going to add that here, making sure that my pattern is in the right direction, and I'm going to mount this leaving a small white border all the way around. All right, so now we have the base of our card. I'm using my magnetic platform, and I'm a big fan of that when I'm using framelits because it keeps them in place. It really creates a nice contact between the plate and the die so that it doesn't shift. I'll be putting a clear mat on the bottom, and I'm going to pull out my dies. I'm using the Lots of Labels framelits, and I'm going to choose the 2 larger framelits from this set. I love these because they have cascading sizes, which makes them great for layering. On the front of this card, we're going to start with the largest framelit, and we're going to die cut an opening. So I'm going to open up my card so it fits on my platform. Then I'll line up the framelit, just looking for approximately the same amount of space at the top and the bottom, centering it just the best that I can. Another clear mat over the top, and then I'm going to crank this through. This has now created an opening on the front of the card for that Z-fold to come through, but we're not going to throw this away. We're actually going to use this on the flip side of this card, and I'll show you that in just a second. Now, while I've got my Big Shot out, I'm going to do some other die work. I'm also going to die cut on a piece of black paper, that smaller framelit that I pulled out. And I'm going to place that here, and I'm going to crank that one through as well. And this time, I'm actually going to use the detail die from the coordinating Bethlehem edgelets. This little cityscape is absolutely beautiful. You'll notice too that there are 2 of them inside the framelit set, as well as some other pieces, some of which we're going to use today. But I'm going to give you a little tip about this. Because it's a detailed die, I have found it best to work with the precision base plate. This steel plate fits right over the magnetic platform on your Big Shot. And then here's my next huge tip. I find that a piece of parchment paper is going to help release all those pieces super simple. I've got a piece of white cardstock here where I'm going to die cut. I know that it's shorter, but I'm not going to need the whole thing, so I'm just going to lay that there. You're not going to need a clear mat on the bottom because the precision base plate takes the place of that, but a clear mat over the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and just crank this through. With detailed dies, you'll need to crank probably a little bit slower. You'll hear a lot of cracking and popping with your Big Shot at times, and that's all normal. So what I like to do is I like to tell my customers, pick it up, flip it over. You should be able to see that it's die cut everywhere. Every Big Shot is different, so you can see the pieces are falling right out. So if yours isn't die cut, crank it back through the other way so that you can get a second pass. Okay, so it's die cut now. What I like to do is I like to start by pulling the pieces apart, but look what's happening. It's already coming out of the die because of the parchment paper. We want to talk about easy. This is such a fabulous tip. You're going to look at those intricate dies in a whole new way. I'm going to use my paper piercing tool, just kind of poke out those windows. You're going to also find inside the die, you're going to have the negative piece of the parchment paper. So you want to make sure that you take that out. You don't want those to build up in your die as you go to use it repeatedly. So there you go. Isn't that a great tip? And on this black one is where we're actually going to create the scene for our card. This is that die cut cityscape that we just did, and I'm going to adhere that here to the base of the card. But before I do that, I want to emboss some stars. So I've pulled out the star image from that stamp set, and here I've got my embossing buddy. I absolutely love this little tool. By rubbing it on your paper, what it's going to do is it's going to create an anti-static surface so that when we pour the powder on, the powder won't stick where there isn't ink, which is great for avoiding those small flecks that get on your paper, especially with dark cardstock when it's really noticeable. When you heat emboss, you're going to need to use a pigment ink, or my favorite is the Versamark. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up my stars, and I'm going to stamp some here in the background. I'm just going to stamp them randomly, just to create a little bit of a scene. I've got my Stampin' Scrub right off camera, and I'm really diligent about making sure I get the Versamark off my stamp as soon as possible. It does leave a little bit of a sticky residue. This is silver embossing powder, and I'm going to dump that right over those images. And I like to work over a coffee filter, and that helps me to collect the excess powder so that I'm able to pour it right back in the bottle. So watch. Just going to pinch the top, and then in it goes. This is going to assure little to absolutely no waste. One bottle is going to make lots and lots of cards. Now, another quick tip for you when you're heat embossing, if you're like me, you'll find that there's just a little bit of grit around, and that's because I've got the ceiling fan on. But I use a Swiffer. This is just a regular household Swiffer, and that picks up all those little extra flecks perfectly. All right, so now that looks good. Don't worry about that white area from the embossing buddy. I'll give you a tip about that in a minute. So I've got my heat tool here. I'm going to put that on number 2, speed that up, and I'm going to dry this. What's going to happen is as this ink begins to dry and the gun gets hot, it's actually going to move pretty quickly. You're going to see that it's going to turn from that powdery finish to that beautiful foil finish. Isn't that pretty? It's almost like magic, isn't it? Takes just a few minutes, but the gun is very, very hot, so make sure that you keep your fingers far away from it. This is not something I would let the younger kids do without lots of supervision. It really is quite warm. All right, so we've got a little bit of a starry background there on our card. You don't want to overheat it too. You want to make sure that you've got it just till that's that silvery look so that it's finished. I also know while I've got my heat tool out that I'm going to want a star for the inside of my card. I have another piece of Whisper White cardstock, and again, my Versamark ink, and the star from that same stamp set. Again, where's my embossing buddy? I'm going to put that here. There's a die for this star, which is going to make this really simple. I'm going to ink that up. Right on my Stampin' Scrub that goes. I'll cover that, and then I'll bring my powder back in. Guess I shouldn't have covered it, huh? I'm going to need it again. And then I'm going to powder that right over the top. All right, back to my heat tool. On that same piece of paper, I am going to stamp Mary and Joseph with the donkey, and I'm switching over to my basic black ink pad, and I'm going to ink that up. This is a felt mounted pad. It's a lot different than the classic pads that have your colors on them. Those are dye based. Those are actually foam based, and this is linen based, so it's a little bit firmer. Lots of firm, even pressure, and then a lift. Now set that aside. This ink is a little bit slower to dry because it is pigmented. Remember we talked about that white powdery area? Take that same Swiffer and just rub over it, and that's going to remove that for you. I'm going to put my silicone craft sheet underneath me because we're going to do a little bit of gluing, and that's going to be for the cityscape. This is going to ensure that my work surface stays sticky free, so everything's going to fall on here. I tried adhesive and it was really troublesome, so I found that this works best using the multi-purpose glue. I'm going to lay this to the side. I'm going to flip my city over, and we're not going to need glue on the whole thing, but we want to make sure we've got it covered so it doesn't lift. The only tip I can give you about this is to use it sparingly. So I literally just put little tiny drops. It's stronger than you think, and it doesn't dry completely clear. It's a little bit tacky. It's more like a craft glue, but I love it for this kind of thing because I am assured that when I put it down, it's going to stay where I put it. I don't have to worry about it. And then I'm going to use my piercing tool to help me pick that up. That'll keep glue off your fingers. I'm going to bring my label back here. I'm going to give this a second to dry, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to follow this line with my scissors just to cut away the excess. These two pieces we're going to die cut. I have my magnetic platform once again and that clear cutting mat, and I'm going to lay my images on here. These are all part of that same framelit set. So we've got the one here for the donkey. And my tip for you on this one is to look at the donkey's feet. Those should be inside those holes. And then there's another one here for the star. Put a clear mat over the top. We're back to that panel. I have a pair of scissors in the stamp studio that I designate just to sticky jobs, and that's why they have the red ribbon on them. I don't like to gunk up my good ones. I'm sure you guys can relate to that. So I'm just going to cut along the outside edges here, following that paper as a guide. That's going to make sure that I get it nice and even. We have our image of Mary and Joseph, and I'm going to go ahead and use my mini dimensionals for this. That is just such a fabulous thing. It's going to fit in all those little tight spots. So I'm going to take off those paper backings. And I'm going to mount that image here at the very bottom. Remember this piece? This was the piece that we actually die cut from the front of the card. Remember? Well, flip it over. Look what's on the other side. We've got that perfect white panel for the border of this card. I'm just going to check and make sure that my text is not going to be upside down before I adhere this. So I've cut two panels. They're exactly the same size because these are symmetrical. We're going to stamp the greeting on one side, so I'm going back to my basic black archival ink, and I've chosen the words from the stamp set. On the other panel, I'm going to stamp the cityscape that's also part of the stamp set. Now this does not mimic the die. This is smaller, and I like that because you've got more options. Do you see how I'm inking it upside down too? Whenever my stamp is larger or even very close in size to my ink pad, we have much better luck of getting it covered well by turning your ink pad onto the stamp versus the way we normally do. So I'm going to stamp this near the bottom. We've got our words, and we're going to mount those on our inside of our panel. So I'm going to add adhesive here. Remember the star that we stamped and embossed? Well, we're going to go ahead and add that to the card now. I'm using another mini dimensional. I'm going to place that here in the center. I'm going to take off the paper backing, and I'm going to get this ready for my metallic thread. I've heard from a lot of you that you love this stuff, but you have trouble using it. So I'm going to give you a good tip today. What you're going to do is you're going to use your hand or your fingers as a gauge for how wide that you want this. So I'm going to do 3 fingers today. So I'm going to have a raw end down here at the bottom, and then I'm going to wrap it around 3 of my fingers, 1, 2, and 3. And you can go around as many times as you like. And then I'm going to slide it off. You see how I'm pinching it. And then I'm going to pinch it in the center. And it doesn't have to be pretty. I think this is the biggest mistake people make. They're like, it's not even. That's okay. It's not supposed to be. And then I'm going to determine which way I want this to lay on my card. So I'm going to lay it right on that dimensional. This is why you've got to have that backing off and ready to go. Otherwise, you're going to be fumbling. All right, and then I'm going to give this little end a haircut here. It's a little bit long. And then once I get this on my card, I can fan out those little ends a little bit more. That just adds a little bit of pizzazz to this. And I'm going to put that right over here over my city. And I'm going to fan those out, and they will stay that way. So look, isn't that pretty? What a pretty focal point for the card. Now it's just a matter of construction. All right, we've got the base of our card here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my Z fold inside my card. Now, I'm going to recommend that you take a pencil that's going to help you to determine how far towards the crease it needs to go. Yours may need to come out here a little bit more. It may need to go in a little bit more. But I like to gauge that before I go crazy adhering it, because once it's down, it's down. I'm going to hold my image over the top because that's going to fit inside the hole. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm not going to be able to see these little black areas here. So I know I'm going to have to move this over. So I'm going to slide this over a little bit more. And then I'm going to add this here. Do you see how I'm just manipulating this? Now, if you're not picky, you can just adhere it, and then what you can do is just cut those little corners off, but just be careful. So I know mine's going to have to go about here. I'm looking to see that this is relatively straight, and I'm going to draw myself a little line right here and right here. But this is going to tell me where to position this. So now I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to add adhesive to the back. And those pencil marks, I'm going to line this up, starting here on the left side, and looking to make sure it is straight as possible, and then over here on the right side. And look, you can't even see those pencil marks. All right, and then I'm just going to rub. Now what we're going to do is we're going to adhere the image through the front, but it's only going to get adhered to this panel. You don't want to adhere it here, otherwise it's not going to open. Right here, I am going to place adhesive. I'm taking my panel and I'm lining it up in that opening, just looking at the top and the bottom. It's like a puzzle. Then I'm going to press. Okay, and then I'm going to lift. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to rub from the back to make sure it's good and stuck. I have a 2-inch piece of this silver metallic edge ribbon. This ribbon is absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to use a glue dot to make it into a small loop. So I'm going to place one here. And then I'm going to connect the ends. They're going to be hidden to the back. And then I'm going to use one more here. And I'm going to attach this here behind this panel. But when I do so, I want to make sure it doesn't extend past the circumference of the outside of the card so that it gets into the envelope, because this will fit in a standard envelope. So here's how the card works. We've got the flap, and then it opens like this. Here's the card we created today. Here's the one I created before you joined me. Remember to head over to my blog to get all those cutting dimensions and see the still photos and the supplies. Remember too, when you place your order in my online store, I give generous and exclusive rewards for those orders. You can find all the details there on my blog. And if you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I would be more than happy to send you a complimentary copy of the catalog. Just leave me a comment. Thanks so much for being here today, everyone.